And they're not nebulous things. They're in your face. I mean, those tubes, plexiglass tubes.
Yes,
and lights in those tubes. There's just an enormous amount of stuff he has on his website.
Well, our attention was drawn to that by Henry Deacon as well, to those tubes, which is a fascinating.
Yeah, I always say I'm not the world's foremost authority on anything. If there's any value in my person and my work, I would say this, that I have been privileged to be in the company of extraordinary people doing extraordinary work. And I have been privileged to sit in their company and be accepted by them and be able to learn things behind the scenes that other people will never be privy to hear.
Isn't it true, though, that you were told that you have a mission that is going to come to the fore late in life?
Yeah.
And that you might actually be there now? Do you want to tell that story at all?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mentioned this, I think, on Coast to Coast once, but it was very quickie because George wants to hear all the stories as long as it's within a minute and a half. But
we have longer than that.
Yeah. But when I was 19, I ended up in Los Angeles at 19 years old with $7 in my pocket, incidentally. I had no idea where I was going, where I was. I ended up in Los Angeles on a Friday night with $7 in my pocket. And, a stupid kid, but I lived through it. But later on, a couple months later, after I got a job and things were working out for me, I was in North Hollywood one morning, on a weekend morning, and I went into a restaurant, and the place was crowded, and there was only one seat available, and that was at the counter. So I sat at the counter, and there was a young girl sitting next to me, so we started talking. Come to find out, she only lived about 2 blocks from me, and I only lived about 2 blocks from town. So she had walked downtown, I had also. So we started hanging out together. I'd meet her downtown, we'd hang out together. And this is back in '59, and I was 19 years old. And so when we would walk home, I lived 2 blocks closer, so she had 2 blocks further to go. So I never knew exactly where she lived, but she knew where I lived. One night she came over to my place and said, "My dad wants to see you. He wants to talk to you." And of course that put me on alert. I said, "I don't want to talk to your dad, right?" And she said, "No, my father is a very important and interesting man. He wants to talk to you. He's got something to tell you." So that sounded interesting, so I went with her. And when we walked up to the house, which was only a couple blocks away, we walked up to the house. Just by chance, he happened to be coming out of the house. And the moment I saw him, I got an incredible feeling came over me of some kind of a euphoric, strange, wonderful feeling that I got being in his presence. It was as if I were in the presence of a great prophet or some spiritual man. I felt it, and I loved the feeling. I mean, I can't describe it, but I loved the feeling. It was an otherworld feeling. And I noticed that he was very much in control of himself. He knew exactly what he was doing, so he motioned for us to come in. We went in, and we sat, the girls sat on the floor, the fireplace, they sat on the floor. He sat on one end of the sofa, I sat on the other end of the sofa. The wife was in the kitchen. I never did see her that whole night. And so we were talking, and he was, he was asking me how I like living in California, and do you have a job, and how do you like your job? And just small talk. And I was beginning to feel a little, the apprehension was going away. I was beginning to feel a little bit better being in his company. But I knew there was something about this guy that wasn't right. But I loved the feeling. And I'm 19 years old, so I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I'm just talking to this guy who's dazzling me with his presence of mind and the presence he presented. And so we're talking about all kinds of things. And then when he felt that I was sufficiently at ease, he said to me very nonchalantly, he said, remember when you were 8 years old back in Florida and your father built a new back porch and your uncle helped him, and remember your dad used green lumber and it smelled funny and you built a new back porch, you remember that? And tears started to come to my eyes. And I didn't want to show tears in front of my girlfriend, but he was scaring me because he was right. And he knew it. And he said to me, well, did that happen or didn't it? And I said, yes, that happened. And he said, also, one night when you were in bed, you got out of bed and you went out in the back porch. And you were looking at the moon, and the moon was full. You remember that? And I said, yes, I remember that. And he said, and you were picking the wood because it smelled funny. It was green lumber, it smelled funny. And you were picking it with your finger. Remember how you picked a piece of it and you were smelling it and tasting it? And he said, remember doing that? And now I'm really scared because it's frightening to me. And I said, yes. And he said, well, did you do that or didn't you? I said, yes, I did. And he said, well, how would I know that? How would I know what you did? And I said, I don't know how you know. And he said, I know because we were there. You just didn't see us, but we were there watching you. And I thought, well, and he said, well, because he could tell I was not buying it. He said, was I correct in what I said? Yeah, well, how would I know if I wasn't there? And he said, we were there. And I said, who was we? He said, that's not important right now. What's important for you to know is that you're in California because we brought you here. We brought you here to Los Angeles. And I said, you brought me here? He said, yeah, why are you here? I said, I don't know why I'm here. I just had to come to Los Angeles. He said, that's right. We brought you here. He said, because what did you say to God? You talked to God that night. The night you sat on the porch, you said something to God. What did you say? And I just sat and looked at him. He said, I'll tell you what you said. You said you asked God to let you do something important with your life. You wanted to do something of value and importance with your life. And that was about 8 or 9 years old, right? I said, yes, that's what I said. And he said, well, then we're going to give you an opportunity to do something with your life then, because you did ask. And I'm still amazed listening to him. And he said, what we have for you to do will not happen until the later part of your life. And I'm not going to go into it right now, he said. I'm not going to go into explain it to you now. However, when the time comes for you to do what we have brought you here to do, you will know what you have to do. By that time, you will be sufficiently knowledgeable on who you are and what you're doing and where you're going. And he said, all you need to know now is that we brought you here and that we will protect you wherever it is that we put you. And I asked him, I said, I still don't understand what you're saying. And he said, you don't need to. But one day you will understand. And he said, so I'm here to start you on your journey. He said, I have a book I'm going to give you. And I want you to read the book, and that will begin your journey. And he pulls it off the shelf and gives it to me. And today you can still get that book in bookstores anywhere. It's called The Complete Works of Charles Fort, F-O-R-T. Even in England, there's a Fortean society dedicated to the work of Charles Fort. Fascinating book. It's a monumental work, very thick book. Complete Works of Charles Fort. And he opened the book indiscriminately, just put his hand on the page because it's a very thick book, and he opens the page and he reads a paragraph. He just opened the page and reads a paragraph. He knew exactly what he was doing. Precisely what he was doing. I didn't know because it looked like he just indiscriminately opened it. And he read a paragraph that just blew me away. I was knocked out by what he just read. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And he said, oh yeah, the book is filled with that kind of thing. Let me read you another one. And he opened it up again. And just indiscriminately read something. Not indiscriminately. He knew what he was doing. I'm sure that he knew how to get your particular attention. What would be very interesting to you, I may not even see. But he knew how to play on my emotions. And he read about 3 little paragraphs, one after the other. And each one